Sometimes I think about the ways that the patriarchy strips young girls from being able to have a childhood just because from such a young age we're already being groomed to be someone's wife someday, be someone's mother someday. We never really get that chance to just be a girl. From the uncomfortable dresses that don't allow us to freely play as much as we want because sitting there and being the perfect little doll and looking pretty all day is already the top priority, not our comfort and what we feel like doing. And then we're sexualized to such an extent that everything that we're doing, especially if you're a black young girl, it's like everything you're doing is for male attention while they're simultaneously telling you if you don't do this, then you're not going to get a husband or you're not going to have a man one day. In their minds, everything that you do is because you want male attention. And so if you do anything at all, it's so overly sexualized. You're fast, you're this, you're trying to attract this type of attention. Like you can't just be. Then the emotional labor tends to start at that age when you're super young because you're already expected, like, oh, Tommy is just having a bad day. He's hitting you because he likes you and stuff like that. We're already being told to manage other people's emotions and feelings and tolerate mistreatment from those ages. Then I think a lot of girls can relate to just knowing that from a very young age, you were aware of not feeling completely safe around men, or maybe you didn't have it as a conscious thought, but you knew that feeling of being catcalled and not knowing what was going to happen and knowing the fear that came with that and just hoping that they would drive away and being so confused because I remember one of the times that I was catcalled, I was literally wearing sweats and a One Direction backpack, so there was no room to like not know that I was a very young girl. And I just remember being so confused, like what could I possibly be doing? But of course, it goes back to it doesn't matter with what you're wearing. A predator is going to be a predator. But it feels like during those times when you're a young girl, you're constantly trying to figure out how to keep yourself safe. And that's not something that you should have to worry about as a child. You shouldn't have to worry about grown men looking at you in those ways. You shouldn't have to be aware of how prevalent male violence is and how dangerous they are. But that is the reality. You don't get to just have a childhood. And that's not to say that nothing happens to young boys. I'm just saying that typically boys are able to go out in the world and they are not worried about being catcalled. They are not worried about being looked at in those ways. And I think it strips a person of a childhood when they have to think about that. They don't get the chance to be naive to those disgusting, just repulsive aspects of life because from such young ages you're able to notice that they're looking at you in ways they're not supposed to be, and there's just so many other like gendered things that take away from the childhoods that we should be allowed to have, not to mention things like child marriage and things like that. It's horrific. So yeah, it's really hard when you didn't really get to have genuine childhood to then be an adult woman and not really have a strong sense of self, not really know how to stop being so, how to stop putting other people's comfort above your own, how to navigate the world as well as you would hope that you would be able to, because you didn't even get to have that stepping stone of childhood. So then you're just thrust into adulthood where you're supposed to know everything and you're supposed to know how to navigate relationships with men, even though from the youngest of ages, you were simultaneously accused of trying to get their attention and that being a bad thing. Well, also, if you don't do this, then you're never going to get their attention, and that's also a bad thing. So it was a constant tug of war, and I think just growing up in this society is really difficult for any girl, so
And we are going to see more of that in the next coming of years because Pygmisha, as we call it, did not start with us. It started with young girls who are being groomed with older men to be in relations with. And the more we see poverty, because poverty makes a gap in that, the more we go back to those days where people are going to do what's necessary, because we find that people who are in these situations of poverty tends to do more harm because they are on survival mode. And I'm gonna just tell the story of this young lady, and you're going to see what I mean in her story. Because Pygmisha did not start with us. We saw it from our great parents, because they were married off young and they never had ideas of their own. And this is why marriages worked, because they couldn't leave home. So now we're entering an age where, yes, we shouldn't be doing these things, but on the other hand, we have high levels of poverty, high levels of unemployment, high levels of high levels of literally existing, and people are going to do what's necessary for them. Literally, it's going to do what's necessary for them, and it's going to just go back to how it used to be. I just hope it never gets to it, but let's tell the story of this young lady and we understand how our grandmothers were thinking.
Oh, look! It's a father and daughter washing dishes back in the olden days when America was great! Wrong! Wrong! That's not what you're seeing here. This is not a father and daughter. It is, I'm afraid to say, a husband and wife. A husband and wife. I'm going to say it 3 times like Dr. Umar. A husband and his wife. In 1937, 22-year-old Charlie Johns married 9-year-old Eunice Winstead. For context, I graduated college. I graduated undergrad when I was 22. And when I was 9, I still had baby teeth, and my mommy and daddy were tucking me into bed and reading me bedtime stories. For context, Charlie paid the preacher man $1 so that he could marry his incredibly underage neighbor. Now, the pastor said that he didn't realize she was as young as she was. They also falsified the marriage license with her birth date on it. Yeah, I don't get it either. She told her mommy and daddy that she was going out to buy a new doll. And then, next thing you know, she's married to the grown-ass man living next door. 1937. So what did this little girl's parents think? I mean, if some grown man tried to marry my 3rd grader, I'd put a bullet between his eyes. That's me, though. Eunice's parents was on something else, though, because they actually defended this nonsense. Mom is quoted as saying, "Why can't they leave decent married folks alone? Why can't they just leave them decent married folks alone, even though one of them is an actual child?" She's also quoted as saying, "Charlie ain't never laid a hand on her, but I want him to make her mind, and I appreciate him correcting her mistakes. He's a good boy, anybody will tell y'all." There were photos of the couple published in national newspapers, and the response was a lot of people thought this was weird, okay? It's 1937, and yes, I know y'all are going to be in the comments telling me about the uncomfortable age gap that your grandparents had. This was a lot. People really thought that this was weird. Charlie really just wanted everyone to leave them alone so he could, victimize this young girl in peace and privacy, okay? He was like, leave us alone. He even took her out of school, okay? She went back to school after they got married, and he pulled her out because I guess she got in trouble at school for not following directions because she's in the fucking 3rd grade, and he took her out of school, so she was never even formally educated. When they got married, there was no age minimum to get married, okay? There was no age defined, so this was legal. But Tennessee and several other places like Rhode Island and DC said, we should put an age minimum on this marriage thing because people are taking this too far. And so Tennessee actually made the age 16 as the minimum for marriage. There was even a film made about this case. It was like a dramatized version, okay, where a woman is trying to create advocacy for child brides. Now, this film is controversial on its own because for some reason, it features a 12-year-old girl completely nude for a very uncomfortable amount of time in the film with an old man leering at her. I don't think it was necessary to have that scene in the film to tell this story, but I guess in 1938, when this was made, they felt like they needed to do that. I don't know. I would never watch this. Please don't try to look this film up. Now, the two of them go on to have 9 children together. Eunice had her first baby at 15. 15. At 15. They went on to have 9 kids. But karma, let me tell you about karma. Check this out. This is Eunice and Charlie's daughter, Evelyn. When Evelyn was 17, she fell in love with a 20-year-old young man named John Henry. And Charlie had him arrested because he felt like his daughter was too young to get married at 17 to someone who's a lot more age appropriate at age 20. The irony! And in 1960, when talking about her daughter marrying this young man, Eunice says that she kind of wishes her daughter would wait till she's 21, and that she actually said that she did not support her daughter getting married to this young man because she wished that she would have waited. Very interesting. Now, mind you, she's about 32 years old in this photo, had been married for 23 years at this point. Fascinating story.